Brad, have you ever had this happen in conversationally with a stranger where one chance sentence leads to a whole branch of a conversation that you're like, how did we get here? You're like 5 minutes into this conversation going like, I regret so much that I walked us down this path.
And you're wishing you could go back and unsay that one thing, because other than that, it was probably a perfectly pleasant conversation, but this one thing has you in a place that you never thought you'd be.
Yes. Okay, so I got to tell you the story from San Diego Comic-Con. So Beth and I are working the booth, and the day's going great. It was a Saturday, I think it was, and the sales were fantastic. I was very busy, and this older woman, about 75, 78, comes up to the booth, and she's like, "What's this?" And I go, "Oh, that's my sci-fi collection drive. Feel free to have a read through." And I give her the quick pitch of it, and she goes, so here was the trigger moment. I should have seen this coming. She goes, "Do you do sci-fi conventions?" And I go, "Nah, they're not really for me. I like to do Comic-Cons, and that's about it." Yeah. And she goes, "Well, this is honest to God is how she launches in. Well, that's why you're failing. You need to be going to sci-fi conventions." And I said, well, I didn't say this, but in my mind, I'm like, well, hold on. We're taking a big leap by using the word failing. First of all, that's kind of a big running jump there, is to say that someone first of all, who says that out loud? Second of all, who says it to a stranger that you've literally just met and know nothing about?
I'll tell you who. The mother of the making a go of it guy.
So she was not a reader, by the way. She was just someone who came up to the booth, right? Just someone coming by.
She's just a rando.
And she goes, "Well, let me ask you then, why don't you do sci-fi conventions? There's a reason why you're not breaking into sci-fi. She literally goes, you want to be a sci-fi artist? You want to be a sci-fi artist? You've got to go to sci-fi conventions."
Oh my God.
Everything in me was doing you were raised well, David, be polite to your elders. You were raised well, be polite to your elders. Don't say anything.
Oh, you're a better man than I am.
And so I was like, well, yes, ma'am. I want to be a sci-fi artist.
Oh my gosh. You played into her game.
I know. Well, I couldn't get out of it. The politeness was digging me deeper. And she's like, listen, I want to tell you, if you want to make a career in sci-fi, you've got to go to a sci-fi convention. And I was like, well, they don't really work for me. And she goes, why? Why would a sci-fi convention really work for you?
Oh, my goodness.
And I wanted to say, well, it's because everybody at a sci-fi convention is 85 years old and white and like locked down what they're reading 40 years ago, and no one buys anything.
And borderline belligerent in their attitude.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy moly.
I was like, well, for me, the 2 or 3 sci-fi conventions that I've gone to, it's a very specific group that last found a new author when Ray Bradbury was hitting the scene, you know?
Yeah.
And I love the Martian Chronicles. I want more like that, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So anyway, I finally shake it by being like, well, agree to disagree. I don't really think comics or sci-fi conventions are for me. Right? Yeah. That's the end of it. Okay, thank God that conversation's over. Moving on to the next customer.
10 times more polite than I would have been.
Right, okay, but you think it's over, Brad.
Yeah.
Guess what? She came back to the booth 2 more times to keep telling me to go do sci-fi conventions.
No!
And Beth and I are like, what's happening? How did we trigger this person that she's got a personal goal now, a vendetta, to come get me to do a sci-fi convention? I'm like, I don't want to do sci-fi conventions. They don't work for me. And she's like, listen, she keeps saying it this way, though, Brad. She's like, listen, do you want to succeed in sci-fi or not? And I was like, well, yeah, I'm listen. Eventually, I got a little more stern. I'm like, I'm doing fine. Everything's fine. I don't need to know. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, she's literally putting you in the position where you've got to say something really douchey, like, listen, I'm making X amount of money. There are more NBA players than there are cartoonists making their full living from this. I'm one of those. Now go away.
Also, just everything in me, the way I was raised, was like, you don't brag, and you definitely don't brag to strangers, you know?
Right.
So I didn't want to be like...
that's just it. If you say that, then you become the
then
jerk.
Then I become the dick. Like, she's making me... So I can't be like, look, lady, everything's fine over here in Dave Kellett land. You just relax and move along. I can't do that,
Here's my tax forms. Here's my 1040. I got it printed out just in case Ted Rawl comes around. I'll show it to you. You'll see there's no T-shirts on there. Boy, you got to be old to get that reference. And there it is. Now, suck an egg. No, you can't, because then you're a jerk.
So she comes by again the second time. She's like, did you give more thought to the sci-fi convention? I'm like, yeah, it's not for me.
You're kidding me.
No, I am 100% not kidding you. And Beth is like, what is with this person? And Beth nailed it. She's like, at this point, it's just narcissistic. It's like, I'm going to fix your problem. By the way, there's no problem to fix. But she comes back. Okay, so the third time she comes back with a printed out application for a show in LA. She's like, you send this application in and you tell him that we met at this show and that you need a panel, because if you get a panel, then you'll get a bunch of people come to the booth. I'm like, yeah, I know how conventions work. And she's like, you fill this out and then you go to that show and you're going to find success in sci-fi. You've got to start applying yourself. And I was like, how did I get in this? God, I just want anything but this conversation. This is terrible.
And did you catch a name? Was her last name Isimoff or something? I mean, was she the queen of sci-fi conventions? Was she the central diplomat of the Hugo Awards?
Yeah, I mean, like if it was something like, hi, I'm Ursula Le Guin and I'm here to help your career, you'd be like, all right, I'm ready to listen.
Yeah.
Not a septuagenarian that's like, here's what you're doing wrong. You need to go to sci-fi conventions. I'm going to fix your career.
You want to succeed, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That was the most dickish phrase. Well, you want to succeed, don't you? You want to be in sci-fi. Clear. You're writing these books. And a version of it was, well, I mean, you want to get past this self-publishing stuff. And I was like, I'm fine. This is literally paying for my career. I'm fine with self-publishing. What are you trying to get me to accomplish? By the way, I talk to sci-fi authors, Brad. I know what they make working for sci-fi publishers. I don't want to go down that path.
No kidding. Meanwhile, you turn to the sci-fi author next week going, well, you want to succeed, don't you? You got to self-publish. You know, what are you looking at this for?
But just the hubris of, well, you want to imagine it, Brad, if I had never met you and I walked up to you at a convention, like what kind of hubris and narcissism do you have to have in your heart to be like, well, you want to succeed, right? Well, listen to me the next 3 times I visit you as I tell you how to succeed.
My blood pressure is going up just listening to this secondhand. If I would have been there, I would have been livid. There's a real amount of we haven't found the right word. It's not hubris. It borderlines on entitlement. It's like, I know what's right for you, even though I know nothing about the road you're walking. But I'm going to tell you everything about how you should be doing it. It's a great line from Glenn Ross, which I quote constantly. Here's a piece of gum. Let me show you how to chew it.
So there's a line that I think my wife came up with that we use to describe people like this, because my wife and I like to think we default towards kindness in this world, right?
Oh, yes.
And but there is a phrase that my wife came up with, which was, "Don't make me have to be the asshole." You know,
because one of us is going to have to go there, and at this point, it might just be me.
Right. So, like, for me to successfully have gotten out of this conversation well and truly, I would have had to become an asshole. I would have had to be like, "Look, lady, here's how much I'm making. I'm doing fine. This is my fantastic assistant. The business is going great. Go away." You know, like And so, like, why would you put me in that spot where I have to become the asshole to finish this conversation? Like, it's such a weird thing to do.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
And if you would have just avoided the topic of sci-fi conventions, it would have been a perfectly enjoyable conversation.
And that would have been it. If I just said like, "Oh, have a look at my pins. Done. Out. I'm out." But I picked the one wrong person at the convention to be like, "Oh yeah, well this is my sci-fi book." "Oh, well, if you want to, do you want to be a sci-fi artist? Do you want to be a sci-fi artist?" And just like kept asking. I was like, "Oh God, how do I get out of this?"
Next time you see this lady coming up, you point her to the pugs, because she can't ask you. You want to be a pug, don't you? She's got nowhere to go after that one, baby.
She had nowhere to go. Yeah. Anyway, on that note, Brad, I think we've talked enough about because my blood actually, I'm angry again, and I'm like,
I know.
So let's get back to a happy note and say hello, everyone, our dear friends, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making a career in sci-fi
and making a go of it from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his slightly frustrated friend Dave Keller, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, Let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. So we've successfully put San Diego Comic-Con to bed, so it's time to get back to the business of Comic Lab. And the first thing we want to talk about this week is we got some very kind feedback from a few sources about the conversation 2 weeks ago about page numbers, or maybe it was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But Brad, I think you had the most coherent response and thoughts on it about page numbers. So why don't you go ahead and jump in on this first?
I had a delightful exchange with someone named Guinevere, who said, quote, as a student and academic, it is immensely beneficial to have page numbers. Otherwise, it's hard, if not impossible, to cite your work in essays, articles, and other references. Missing page numbers makes it difficult to track down and find original sources. Please include them, with a couple of please emojis. And as you remember, we had talked about page numbers for graphic novels, and I particularly said, it's, if you want to do them, you can do them, but if not, who cares? And she was like very, very kindly trying to kind of set me right. And my response, in all honesty, was I said, I don't disagree, especially for folks doing more serious comics. I can certainly see the benefit, but I want to ask you honestly, who's going to cite a page from an Evil Inc. graphic novel? And she basically goes on to very, very politely, like you would with a small child that you're trying to explain something to, say, listen, there's a lot of reasons somebody might want to, and these are my words, not hers, I'm paraphrasing. There's a lot of reasons somebody might want to cite your work. You don't get to choose that, but you do get to make it easier on them if you do. And that's really, she made such a compelling and thoughtful rejoinder to what I had said on the podcast that I wanted to say, I wanted to give her that same platform here on the show and say, you know what, if you're considering page numbers, Take Guinevere and all of the librarians and researchers and so on and so forth, all the people who'd like to showcase your work and say, oh, on this page, there's something very thoughtful happening. Give them a page number to make it easier for them to do it. I've totally come around on that topic. It's a really good point. It doesn't take up a lot of ink. It doesn't take up a lot of space. It's something that's super easy for you to do. So why not just do it?
Well, and what's nice about this, what a nice contrast, Guinevere, your way of course correcting Brad versus the lady with me with sci-fi convention. So that's great.
Yeah. It could have been so much worse.
She could have come up to you and been like, Brad, do you want to be in academia? Do you want to be in academia?
You want to be quoted? Do you want to be cited?
But here's the thing, though, Brad, to Guinevere's great point, which I wholeheartedly endorse. All of us collectively as cartoonists, we all, not all the time, but every once in a while we'll be like, comics and graphic novels should be treated as a serious art form in the same way that, like, there's no reason why an E.E. Cummings poem is more impactful on culture than Blankets or Strangers in Paradise or Watchmen or MetaMouse or Razzle or Calvin and Hobbes. So part of that is we have to do what all books do and make it easy for academics to study, discuss, and break down different pieces of work. So Guinevere, bravo to you. I think it's a great point. And I think we can all agree that Brad was in the wrong. I think that's the...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Listen, certainly. I mean, the last person who asked me if I wanted to be cited was wearing a badge. But the way you put this together,
he's here all week.
But the way you know what? Here's the deal. Here's how to get through to somebody like me. And hopefully you're not out there listening. You're not too much like me, but Dave just hit the nail on the head. In other words, put that whole thing that Dave said and turn it on its ear. If someone told me, Brad, you don't need to number your pages because no one's ever going to want to cite your work, I would be madder than a wet hen. I would be livid. Okay. So why would I take on that on my own, right? If somebody were saying to me, don't do that because nobody's ever going to want to cite you, I'd tell them to pound salt, right? So if for nothing else, your argument makes perfect sense to me, because if it was the other way around, I'd be very insulted if someone took that attitude.
Well, okay, so now let's diverge for 1 second on a really important side topic here.
Yes.
Is it a regionalism to say pound salt instead of pound sand?
Oh, I didn't know it was. I've always heard it pound salt.
Really?
I told that guy to pound salt.
That I wonder if that's a Michigan thing because there's so many lakes. Although none of them are salt lakes. Wait a minute, they're all freshwater
lakes.
lakes.
Utah. It's not Salt Lakes.
It's not Salt Lakes. Wait, I think you made this up. I think you've had a stroke.
No.
Pound salt.
Pound salt. Like, look it up. I'm googling it as we. Oh God, it comes right up as pound sand. Pound SALT.
Oh,
pound salt.
Oh, Brad.
What does it mean?
Brad, here's your problem. Do you want to be in sci-fi? Do you want to be in sci-fi, Brad?
Originally, Go Pound Salt is the less vulgar version of Go Pound Sand. The origin of the expression Go Pound Sand is from a longer expression, have enough sense to pound sand down a rat hole. Since filling rat holes with sand is menial work, telling someone to pound sand down a hole is like telling them to go fly a kite. This is considered to be less vulgar.
Wow.
I don't know what was vulgar about either. But
you know what's amazing? Talk about vulgarity in the 1950s. Oh my goodness, he said pound sand. Like that's vulgar to no one. Yeah. Like that's the least vulgar thing I've ever heard. How dare you, sir, to say accuse me to pound sand?
I do believe I'm getting a case of the vapors.
Oh my goodness. So all right, so anyway, to put a button on that one, page numbers, right. I think Guinevere is right, and I think Dave Kellett from 3 weeks ago is right, and page numbers are probably better to add in there.
Wait a minute. You were right there along with me saying you don't need page numbers. What do you mean Dave Kellett was right?
No, I'm ducking out and pretending that I took the opposite stance. I think
only
5% of our listeners will go back and re-listen, so I'm going to just claim that I had the right attitude.
You're about 3 seconds away from me to telling you to pound either sand or salt, whichever happens
Whatever
to be
I say this
closer.
week, I'll just ignore it, and next week I'll say I said it right. So that's the way I'll do it. No, but anyway.
Yeah, Guinevere, I'm glad that you agreed with me.
Whichever one of us was right, the more important thing is Guinevere was right. And so I think we should all take her advice.
Yes.
And let's move on to our next topic, my friend.
Yes.
So this is one that you and I have wanted to talk about for a couple of weeks now since we heard about it, which is the shuttering of Mad Magazine after X number of years out on the newsstands there. And I know you particularly had some insightful thoughts on it and some opinions on Mad Magazine shuttering. So go ahead and lay out to people what happened and why you think it happened and what impact it has.
Well, the owners of the Mad Magazine licensing and their distribution and so forth, they're closing down Mad Magazine, and that's DC Comics, right? And DC is owned by Warner Brothers. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I'm going quiet because you're right so far. Yeah.
So basically, at the end of the day, Warner Brothers decides to close down Mad Magazine. It's not profitable anymore, or maybe it's not. If it is profitable, maybe it's not bringing in a high enough margin. I don't know what their profits are, but they're going to close it down. And immediately, what we see on social media, and this was actually a few other cartoonists pointed this out. Immediately, a bunch of people are very upset because this thing from their childhood is going away, this Mad Magazine. And if I'm being honest, I have very, very fond memories of Mad Magazine when I was a kid. I loved Mad Magazine.
Right.
Getting Mad Magazine was subversive and naughty and funny, and there was everything that was good about being a teenager was Mad Magazine. It was everything that a teen would want, right? It was saying thumbing your nose at authority, and everybody was very, very nostalgic, angry that Mad Magazine was going away. And then a few people pointed out on my social media stream, "Hey, listen, all you people that are so upset about Mad Magazine, when's the last time you bought a copy of Mad Magazine?"
Or Brad, I'll one up you. When was the last time you even saw a copy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, forget about it. Yeah, I don't. I saw. So for me, it had to have been about 10 years ago. Maybe not 10, because Max was a little bit older. Max would have been maybe 7 or 8. Let's say Max was 8, so that means it was less than 10 years ago. Call it maybe 5 to 8 years ago. Anyway, it was in a Rite Aid. I'd taken them to their karate lesson. There was a Rite Aid around the corner. We stopped and I was getting snacks for the kids, and Mad Magazine was there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you kids. I was mainly thinking of my older son, who was a little bit closer to the target age. I said, I'm going to introduce you guys to Mad Magazine, because it was this wonderful thing when I was a kid, and you are going to love it. You're old enough to kind of get it. You're old enough to enjoy it. Yeah, this is going to be great. And they were in the back seat of the car, and I was driving home, and they're reading parts of it and reading it out loud, and they're reading some of the stuff out loud, and I'm getting cold sweat on my forehead, because it's like, oh my God, what did I put in my kids' hands? Like, and call me a hypocrite, but all of a sudden the stuff that I was hearing was super inappropriate. Like, Mad Magazine was snotty and sarcastic and sometimes mean-spirited, but this had stuff to do with like Katy Perry's boobs and masturbation jokes. And I was like, are you shitting me? And at one point, my older son, who tends to be very earnest, I see that the magazine gets thrown into the front seat of the car. And he says, Dad, this is horrible. I can't keep reading it. And I'm like, seriously? And he's like, yeah, this is the worst. He says, I don't feel right reading this stuff. And
I don't feel right. Wow.
Yeah, it was like he was disgusted. And again, and I know he listens to this show, so I won't embarrass him. But do you remember when Sylvester the cat had that younger son, and he was so embarrassed by his father not being able to catch Tweety Bird, and he put the bag on his head? Oh, father, I consider myself an orphan. Well, that was kind of the same tone of voice. It was like, oh, Dad, what are you doing? This Mad Magazine, it's horrible. My kids rejected it. Well, actually, no, I think Max might have, if you would have left it, he would have probably paged through it a little bit more. But yeah, it was like, no, this is not good. And I literally avoided it ever since, out of the sense of just like, the stuff they were reading made me feel creepy that I had put it in my kids' hands.
Well, I'm neither here nor there on that point, because I honestly, Brad, and I'm not saying this in a sarcastic or cynical or snarky way, I have not seen a physical copy of Mad Magazine, and I go to Comic-Cons. I have not seen a physical copy of Mad Magazine for probably 15 years. I don't think that's exaggerating.
No, well, you might see some of the old copies, like the ones made in the 70s and the 80s, resold at in the quarter bins or something. But you haven't seen a new copy in ages.
Right. So I can make no comment about the editorial content of Mad in the last 2 decades. I do remember this, that like you as a kid, I delighted in the movie parodies. I loved Spy versus Spy. I thought the Mort Drucker. I liked the fold-ins. I loved Sergio Aragones's Marginalia.
Yep. I was a Don Martin fan. Anything Don Martin did, Captain Klutz, all that stuff, I was there for it.
And even more so than the magazine itself, I think because my family would pick them up at dime store book used stores, I had maybe 30 or 40 of the slim Mad books that collected just Mort Drucker or just Sergio Aragones or just, whatever the artist was.
Those little pocket books, yeah.
Yeah, so those pocket books, a big part of my childhood. So anyway, what I'm getting at is 9 to 13-year-old Dave Kellett loved him some Mad Magazine.
Yeah.
But I 100% see why this action happened. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because fundamentally, that magazine format is becoming so hard to find a price point that people are willing to buy,
Right.
that also makes a profit and that is easily distributed. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
all of the systems that made that possible are falling apart, right?
Yeah.
So that's part one.
It's got nothing to do with the content. And I know we just spent the last 5 minutes talking about the content, but the folding of Mad Magazine has nothing to do with the content. The content they've actually did recently a couple of pieces that were knockouts. In fact, I think one of them won an Eisner Award this past year. One of the Mad Magazine comics.
The one that they had, I think it was probably 2 years ago that I did see, but interestingly, I saw it only online and only via social media. The one they did on gun control, that was one of the best things Mad Magazine has ever done, and they did that last year or 2 years ago.
That was the Eisner Award winner.
Oh, was it? Okay, yeah.
I'm pretty
so that one was
sure.
Amazing.
But it's not about the content. It's about the publishing system. And we are looking at the end of the print publishing system. It doesn't mean print is dead. But this whole idea of putting out a magazine every month that somebody's going to go and buy, I don't know of a single print publisher that's not struggling.
Right.
Even Playboy has been trying to reinvent itself, and that was a giant in the 70s and the 80s, and even the 90s. They're even struggling for crying out loud.
Right.
I don't know of any company that's making print publishing work. It's not. It doesn't work in today's economy anymore.
Well, so here's the second part of the puzzle, and this is what we can transition into, which is that you can debate back and forth about the profitability of Mad, and I think, frankly, it was still profitable even at the time that AT&T shuttered it, right?
Yeah.
But I may be wrong about that, and I'm totally willing to be called on that, but I believe it was still profitable, which itself is a great accomplishment, right?
Yep.
But here's the thing. AT&T bought Warner Brothers, who bought DC, who bought Mag. Like, what I'm getting at here is to AT&T, even if it's profitable, even if it's massively profitable by comic standards, massively profitable, it is a rounding error compared to 1 hour's of profit from HBO Max or some Batman spin-off video game. Like 1 hour of profit.
Yes.
Right? So AT&T doesn't give two flying shits about Mad Magazine because it is literally a rounding error in their annualized bookkeeping, you know?
Right.
And frankly, keeping the overhead of those 401ks or those health plans or those employees, they're like, why are we doing this? We bought it for Batman. We didn't buy this for Mad Magazine. We don't care about Mad Magazine. Like, are they going to hold on to it? Sure. And they would be smart to hold on to it. But they're like, we'll shutter it.
Of course they are.
We'll figure out some way. Maybe we could spin some profit out of Spy versus Spy. Maybe we'll do another video game, or maybe we'll do another you could imagine what they would do, another sketch comedy show based on Mad Magazine or something. But the magazine itself, it's even if it's profitable right now, Brad, what I'm getting at is AT&T, they had two MBAs sit down, look over the books and go, even if we're profitable right now, it's not like magazines are going to get more profitable.
Right.
You know, it's not like there's growth in Mad Magazine.
Yeah. And by the way, to all the people saying, I hope somebody buys the rights to Mad Magazine and relaunches it, or I hope somebody gets the rights and they're going to relaunch it and then make it better than ever. That's never going to happen, because the value in Mad Magazine, it maybe not would be so much in the continuous publishing, although, like Dave says, for all we know, they were very profitable. But the real value in Mad Magazine is in the 70-plus archives of content and intellectual property that they bought with Mad Magazine. And of course, they're not going to give that out to somebody else so they can potentially sully the name and ruin the brand, or even alter the brand to something that Warner Brothers and AT&T don't want. They're going to hold on to that IP. They're going to hold on to those archives. They're going to make those into merchandise or whatever they want to do with it, but they're not going to rent it out to somebody who's going to screw the brand up, and they're not going to continue publishing Mad Magazine, because the real value there is in 70-plus years of IP.
Right. So, I mean, the way you could equate this is a bad comparison, but it's somewhat helpful. Brad, you and your wife are house hunting, right? And
Right.
you land on this house, Brad. It's got a gorgeous pool in the background. It's beautiful. There's fountains built into it. There's a jacuzzi on a stair. It's got a slide. And then you go to the kitchen. The kitchen is brand new. It's got like a wolf range and a gorgeous fridge and beautiful marble countertops. But then
and a microwave.
There's that one downstairs bathroom in the hallway that's like, I mean, it's serviceable. It does the job. It is a bathroom. But it's like you and your wife are looking at each other like, we're replacing that, right? Yeah, we're absolutely replacing that bathroom.
Yeah, we're getting rid of that.
Like, it's serviceable, but it's not gangbusters. It's not why you're buying the house.
Right.
So
and it's got pink tile and the sink kind of leaks. And it's like,
when you think about why AT&T bought Warner, it's not like they're looking at it going, oh boy, that whole bathroom, right? They're looking at it for the pool in the back and the kitchen, and they're like, I mean, this bathroom, it's serviceable, it does the job, but it's never going to be a better bathroom, so let's just get rid of it. You know,
I'll bring that metaphor right home. The bathroom isn't necessarily something they want, but the fact that it's got all that plumbing in there set up so that they can make it and reuse it or return it into something that they do want, that's useful to them. Not the bathroom, but the plumbing.
This is two guys that have done some home remodeling, clearly, because we're like, oh, if you've got pipes in the walls, you can do something with it.
My friend, as recently as 24 hours ago.
I just remember one time opening up a wall with my brother, and we literally high-fived because there was pipes in the wall, and we're like, we can work with this.
I did. Let me contrast that. Just yesterday, I sent the following text to my wife. Just once, I would like workers to start a project at this home without using the words, "What the heck is this?" That's what happened when they started the plumbing job that took them all day. They got there at 8 and left at 5. Took them all day, and I've got a hole in my ceiling in the living room. And they started out by opening it up, and I hear the guy downstairs say, "What the heck is this?" And I'm just standing up in the upstairs going, "Oh no, not again! This is horrible."
Yeah. And listen, Brad, the problem here is that your house was built in the Roosevelt administration, and it wasn't Franklin's administration. That's the problem.
Yeah, this is Philadelphia, and you're not that far off.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Teddy was with the Rough Riders when your house was built. And so, anyway, to get back to Mad Magazine, here's the thing. Is it heartbreaking for all the incredibly talented cartoonists that were at Mad Magazine? Absolutely. Many of them are actually friends of Brad and I, and our heart goes out to them because this is they did nothing wrong, literally nothing wrong. Sergio Aragonis is still producing amazing work month in and month out for Mad Magazine, right? Like Sergio has done nothing wrong. And his magazine was still chugging along, still doing great. It is literally one of the problems in late stage capitalism is that even something that's profitable is not worth it for a large company in a media merger like this. You know?
Oh yeah. Well, we're hearing more and more about that right here in Philadelphia, and that's what happened. It happened in so many newspapers. A hedge fund buys the newspaper. Runs it into the ground and then sells it off for parts. And we've seen that happen time and time again. And you're right. A lot of this goes right to late stages capitalism. We've got a lot of economic mechanics in place that are just there to grind all this stuff up into a fine powder.
Yeah, I mean, the exact same thing happened at Toys R Us. You know, it did not need to be sold for bankruptcy. It's just that it was loaded up with debt anyway, long story short, it's not great. But here's the thing, though. This is why, as a cartoonist, Brad and I a little bit fear for our friends that are at Marvel or DC or because in the long term, if you are thinking smart about this, you see that Warner Brothers or even Disney, although probably less so with Disney, they don't need the publishing in the way Image needs the publishing, if you know what I mean, Brad.
Right.
And so all it takes is a change of management or a slight hiccup in the direct market system for Disney to go, you know what, never mind, we're just going to do trades. We'll just sell it through Amazon and we'll mainly focus on kids' books. And that's it for us, you know?
And if you're Disney, you can just say, and for the next several years, we're just going to do reprints.
Yeah, you could.
Yes,
you literally could for the 19 relaunches that have been done in the last 19 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I'm saying is, This is one of the reasons among many why I prefer to stay independent and be supple like a reed and not strong like an oak, because granted, a career at Marvel is being strong like an oak, but it can, when that wind blows, eventually you're going to knock the whole thing over, you know? And I do unfortunately feel like we're only one small hiccup away from that direct market system completely falling apart.
Well, and you saw an example of this right on the floor of San Diego Comic-Con.
I did, yeah. So I do not know them well, nor do I follow them well, but Red versus Blue, Brad, which is put out by Rooster Teeth, was also part of the purchase in the larger Warner acquisition by AT&T. And they had a booth at San Diego Comic-Con and have had one for years. And you know how hard it is to get a booth. It's a really nice prime corner spot that Rooster Teeth had. Yeah. It was empty this year. They didn't even send anyone... Yeah, they didn't even send anyone to man the booth. And a part of me is like, did AT&T just go, anything that's making less than $1 million net profit, just shine it. We're just shine it. We're not doing anything with those anymore. And I a little bit feel like I have no inside knowledge. I have no idea what happened. Yeah. There could be 1,000 other things that happened with me with that. But the fact that they didn't even bother to pick up the tab to send 3 employees to San Diego Comic-Con to just man a Rooster Teeth booth.
Just to hand out flyers or something.
Right. It's an amazing glimpse into what's happening with AT&T with this Warner Brothers purchase between Mad Magazine and Rooster
So now
Teeth.
what happened to that real estate? What happened to that real estate? Was it just an empty booth? Did somebody take it over and claim that space? Did it become a place where people just, you see this happening at smaller shows, attendees will just take over the space and sit down and read their stuff and put their stuff there. What happened to the space?
Well, for one thing, you never see this at San Diego because it's the big show. And if you do that, San Diego takes the booth away from you and you never get it back again, you know? So Rooster Teeth, I guess, is probably done now, unless they can come up with some really good reason why they didn't go. But usually, if it's a couple days out or even a couple weeks out, San Diego will very quickly go to somebody on a wait list and be like, hey, we got a booth. You ready? You ready for it? Brad, if you remember, that's how we got a booth one year.
Yes, it was.
So that's one way that could happen. But if it happens the day of and they don't show up, I think like the first day and a half, it was just empty. And then some kind of like signage tarping went up around the booth, if I remember. I'm kind of trying to remember what happened at the last days.
Oh, really? So they just covered it up.
They kind of just, it's like covering up your shame. You know, they just kind of, they tarped it a little bit so it looked like something else. Anyway, all of this is to say, just be careful if you're working for a small to medium-sized publisher, or even a big publisher, because the ground that you're walking on is not fixed, and a few small earthquakes could take down the whole works, you know?
Yep. And this is the time to make your plans. I mean, just using an example from my own life, I saw that happening with newspapers back in 2000, 2001. And that's when I decided to really start building something on the web that I could own and so forth. And by 2012, I was in a position where I could make a transition. But it took me a long time to get there. If this is you, I'll tell you from personal experience, start now. It's going to take longer than you think to build this thing that you're going to need to jump to, your life raft, as it were. It's going to take longer than you think. Start now. Start building now. You don't have. It's not a panic necessarily, but it is. You put a little time into it because this thing takes longer to build. We see that time and time again. I always tell the story. A person comes up to me at a comic convention and buys the Webcomics Handbook and looks at me and says, "This better work. I got laid off Thursday and my unemployment runs out in a few months." And I'm like, dude, this is going to take longer than a few months. You better. Yeah, I tell you what. I bought somebody's book back from them once. I said, "Give me here's your money back. Give me the book." This doesn't happen in 3 months. You need this money way more than anybody else does. Hold on to the money. Get your life in order. But if you're looking to make a success on the web happen in 3 months, come on, you might as well be buying lottery tickets. Take that $15 and buy a lottery ticket.
But here's what happens to Brad and I, mainly because we try to do helpful things like the How to Make Webcomics book or the Comic Lab or Stripped or Webcomics Handbook, things in the past that we've done where we're trying to just, listen, we don't have all the answers, but we're at least trying to share what we know, right?
Right.
So what happens, though, with Brad and I is about 2 weeks before the public knows, Brad and I tend to know when there's about to be massive layoffs at Image or a Marvel reshuffling or a DC reshuffling or Scholastic has some troubles, because all of a sudden, both Brad and I will get a bunch of emails being like, hey, so you know how you guys are always talking about independent comics, webcomics? Can I give you a quick call? Can I just give you a quick call and talk about some, I just got to make some real quick changes coming up, and I would love to talk to you. If you can call me back in the next 5 minutes, that'd be great. And Brad and I both go, I see what's about to happen. Like, I see the writing on the wall here. And listen, I get it. If you've got a family and you're panicking, of course you're going to call someone who seems to be doing independent stuff well. But to Brad's point, it's a thing of slow baby steps for years on end rather than one big leap, usually, you know?
Absolutely. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute and stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, Brad and I are going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
Yeah, because, when you do, you'll get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And an exclusive Patreon post that go even deeper on the Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, no worries.
You can still support the show by rating us wherever you get podcasts.
Leave us a 5-star review and a few kind words.
And that, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
And now, let's talk comics.
So, Brad, before we go any further, we have to mention that our sponsor for this week and the next 8 weeks, of course, is Wacom over at wacom.com.
Yes.
Brad and I have both big-time Wacom users, so this is like the perfect sponsorship ever for Comic Lab. Brad, do you remember the first time we ever used a Wacom? I do.
It's funny. It's. I mean, without sounding like gilding the lily, it's kind of like remembering your first kiss. I remember exactly where we were, and actually, much like our first kiss, you were there.
You legit got me. I did not see that coming.
We were all together the first time we used a Cintiq.
What's awkward about that is you're like, and just like my first kiss, you were there, Chris Straub was there, Scott Kurtz was there. So the four of us were all in Scott Kurtz's hotel room at San Diego Comic-Con. This was probably 12 or 13, maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I, in person, had ever seen a Wacom. And seeing him draw a PvP digitally, honest to God, Brad, I remember it seemed like magic. It seemed like legit magic.
Yeah, we used to joke on Webcomics Weekly about making comics with fire and making things appear out of thin air and stuff like that. This was the closest I'd ever got to that actual metaphor. I mean, it was like, okay, it can't be as good as you're saying it is. It can't be that good. The responsiveness of the pen, and he's like, no. Look, you can tell it's responding to the weight I'm putting on the pen, and we're like, no, it couldn't possibly be. And he set it up on the mattress of one of the beds, and he said, "Come here, try it." And we were both because we didn't have a setup for it. We're kneeling next to the bed,
on the
like
floor,
kneeling.
yes.
Yeah, we're kneeling like in front of an offering in a temple, and we take this stylus and we start making marks all over the template or the document that he had set up in Photoshop, and it was amazing. Like just the degree of sensitivity that we were getting from this stylus, and I have to mention what we were using there was that little 12WX that he used that he later gifted to me. That's sitting right here in front of me and my studio. I it's right here. I'm touching it, and it's still going strong. But man, oh man.
I somewhere in my archives have a photo of that moment, and it's and Chris. It's you and Chris kneeling on the floor, drawing on the mattress on the Wacom, and Scott is kind of like a proud parent watching you two draw.
Oh my God!
And if I can find it in my photo archives, I'll put it on Patreon.com/ComicLab for people to see because it's kind of adorable. Also, we all look so young and thin. Both time and tide came for us,
Not a lot
Brad.
of gray hair at that point.
Not a lot of gray hair. Not a lot of in and out yet had hit in the old waistline.
Funny thing about that in and out, it stays in.
But I remember we drew for about an hour on it, and then we had about a 4-hour conversation of like, this is going to do for drawing what a word processor did for typewriters.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Because it's like you can manipulate and move and alter and change art in a way that analog never allowed for. And anyway, without going too long into the story, it was an amazing and eye-opening experience. And anyway, so it's super appropriate that Wacom is sponsoring the podcast because hot dang, that has been a big part of our career for the last 10 or 15 years.
Oh yeah, I don't know what I'd do without it.
So let's jump into the next topic, my friends. So we had a question come in this week from, as you know, for anyone at the $5 level at patreon.com/comiclab, you can submit questions to the show. And so this one's coming in from Jennifer Schenberger. And Jennifer says, "Hi, Dave, you're wonderful. Also, Brad." So actually,
I love her sarcastic sense of humor.
So this is what she actually wrote. She wrote, "Hi, Dave and Brad." And then she said, "You're welcome, Dave," which I guess, Jennifer, means like, congratulations on being included, Dave. I'm not sure.
No, that you were listed first.
Oh, you're welcome, Dave.
Yes.
I see what happened. Jennifer, I am not good with compliments. Thank you for putting me first, both in your heart and in this question. So here's Jennifer's question. What keys should a first-time web cartoonist have in place before starting a webcomic? I'm not talking about social media or where to post it. I'm talking about the nuts and bolts. How much of it should be fleshed out before the first post? This is my first ever webcomic, and I know it's going to suck, but I want it to suck as little as possible. That's delightful, by the way. Thanks for the advice. I thoroughly enjoy listening to the show, not only for the great advice, but also for the laughs. Well, that's good. Thank you, Jennifer. That's nice to hear.
That makes me feel so much better after that comment we got on. We got a rare 4-star review. Did you see me tweet about that, Dave?
Oh, my God. You're so petty, by the way, that you tweeted the one 4-star review that we got. Actually, angry about it.
I tweet a lot of the 5-star ones. My assistant's just behind on uploading them. But yeah, I wanted to do that just to kind of say, hey, by the way, you could put your review up there and get a little something on the Comic Lab
But
Twitter.
I just delighted that a small part of you was like, no, I'm not letting this go. Someone made fun of my laugh. I'm gonna retweet about this.
I was so upset. Well, I wasn't upset, but I wasn't gonna let that one fly over the plate. It was just too good of a setup.
Anyway, like you with me, I always get a delightful chuckle when you get small, and you got real small there. And I was like, oh, that's fun. It's fun to see Brad get small.
Oh, you should have seen the stuff I deleted. If it would have been my Twitter, I would have gone. But I'm like, nah, this is a Twitter I share with Dave. I can't get too petty, but
that's right. So listen, poor Jennifer is at home with a pencil in hand, leaning forward with her headphones on, waiting for your answer, Brad. So let's give her an answer.
With bated breath.
So she's talking about the nuts or bolts. How much of it should be fleshed out before the first post? I know it's going to suck, but I want it to suck as little as possible.
Yeah. What keys should a first-time web cartoonist have in place? And the answer is, if you're a first-time web cartoonist, the last thing I want you thinking about is what keys should be in first place. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to put all of the joy that you get out of comics into your webcomic and start posting with wild abandon, not worrying about if you're writing correctly, not worrying about if you're drawing right or posting right. I just want you for the first year, and I'm serious about that, 12 months, I just want you to be exhibiting joy and getting appreciation for this and reveling in this new thing that you've created, because there's going to be such a learning curve. And you're going to see once you start paying attention to what you post and how it gets responded to and so on and so forth, that by the end of the first year, you're probably going to be at a place where you're like, oh, okay, I see. And by the way, you'll learn a lot by mistakes. And I know that part of you is saying, well, tell me what mistakes not to make. And I can't tell you because you are unique and there's no way I can guess what mistakes you're going to make. But you'll make them. And cherish them, because those are the best learning experiences you're ever going to have, is the mistakes you make. I tell my kids that all the time. And I'll tell you, make your mistakes, learn from your mistakes. And what's going to happen is after about a year, you're going to get to a point where you're like, you look back and you go, oh, okay, I get it now.
Oh, yeah, I see what I did.
And then I want you to relaunch. What I don't want you to do is to say after your first year, oh, well, I got to keep doing it because everybody knows this thing I did and I don't want to ruin what I've built, all that stuff that we talk ourselves into. I want you to, after the first year, take an assessment and then relaunch with all this stuff you learned, and all the stuff that, and let that joy from the first year carry through, now bolstered by the stuff that you learn that applies directly to you. The only key I'm going to give you is to make all of this happen for your social media, particularly, and perhaps even for your website. I want you to brand it on you as a creator, not necessarily the title of the webcomic, because you are going to change a lot of things. You're gonna say, oh, I did this thing about vampires. I discovered one thing. I hate vampires. I want to do angels and demons instead, right? The best advice I can give you when you get past that first year is don't stick with a mistake just because you spent a lot of time making it, right?
Yep.
Take that first year, do an assessment, take a month in January and go back and assess everything. How do I feel about this? Where is it going? And then give yourself the creative freedom to relaunch and restart, carry that joy over, bolstered by your newfound knowledge. And then we can start talking about fine-tuning social media and your website and ebooks and Kickstarters and Patreon and all that other stuff. But your first year should be focused on one word, and that word is joy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I agree with that. I got to say, in the spirit of friendship, Brad's answer was long enough there where I was able to go make a sandwich and mow the lawn. And so I missed probably a few chunks of it, but I think in general, I agree with the spirit of Brad's answer. I took a small nap at some point in the middle there.
Did you take a nap and hear my voice in your head?
Yeah, it just lilted me off to sleep. I got to say, though, as a partner, it was nice to be included in that conversation. Brad turning to me for my input, asking me what my thoughts were. That was nice. Brad's a sharer. He's a sharing partner.
I paused a couple times to allow you to say, yeah, and that was all there was time for.
Yeah, this was me on the other end of the microphone. Yeah, but I could.
Hey, just thank goodness that I've got the size lungs I have, because if I would have taken a deeper breath, you'd still be trying to get a word in edgewise.
By the way, that's all one breath for Brad, egotistical Geiger over there, just talking for 11 minutes straight. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, of course. First of all, I super agree with Brad. I think maintaining the joy is not even maintaining, sparking with the joy, because it's the beginning. Everything is new and fresh, and discoveries and failures and mistakes. It's all fresh, right? So that's great. But I also want to express sympathy for Jennifer in this moment because, and I think Brad would too, because Jennifer is clearly someone who appreciates comics, knows her comics, loves comics, and so would like to, as much as possible, avoid sucking right out of the gate, right?
Right.
Like, I get that. I wish anytime I ever pick up my guitar and be like, nope, I'm back in. I'm going to start learning the guitar again. I'm like, I wish I could just skip over the first 2 months of it. Like, because I know that's going to be the painful, halting, awkward, like a teenager or not even a teenager, like an 8th grader at a dance, just the worst, just everything's awkward and flailing.
Standing with your back against the wall with the other boys.
Well, just me on the dance floor in 8th grade. Nobody wants to see that. That was just painful for everyone. Anyway, so what I'm getting at here, though, is that I respect Jennifer's question, because I was that person when I started Drive, when I started Sheldon, when I started Stripped, when I started Comic Lab with Brad. We talked a lot about, like, hey, listen, we're going to suck at first for the first few shows of the podcast. How do we minimize the sucking, right? Yeah. So you have my sympathies, Jennifer. And listen, by merely expressing that you want to start, but you want to do it with your best foot forward, Brad has had a version of this thought in many different ways, so I will repeat it, which is that you're already ahead of the game by wanting to start correctly. I can tell you that in the back of your mind, you've already worked out some problems that another type of amateur would be like, I'm fine, everything's fine, I'm going to start drawing, it's fine, everything's fine, la, 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 la.
I know what I'm doing.
Right. You're critiquing yourself in a way that is probably too harsh, but probably means that you have a seriousness of mind and of purpose, that you have already self-edited out some of the worst choices you could make. And so I guarantee you that you are not going to suck as much as you fear you're going to suck.
Yeah. Yeah. So, here's the other thing. What could you possibly give another cartoonist? Like I'm trying to go through a number of different aphorisms or suggestions or rules of thumb, and there's none that really are catch all. There's not a one size fits all thing. I could tell you to avoid doing cats and dogs.
Yeah.
But maybe that's where your heart is. I could tell you never break the fourth wall.
But maybe that's where your strip shines. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you? I mean, I don't know that I could come up with anything.
I can.
For the first year that is going to be pertinent.
I can absolutely do it for the first year.
Go ahead.
And I will tell you, and once I say it, you go, oh, you're right. So here's my a bit of advice, Jennifer. The worst mistake you can make, and the one Brad and I see most often, is not in execution, it's in failing to even start.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I agree 100%.
I have seen and talked to so many people at Comic-Cons and online who never even started because the fear was paralyzing. Like, and that's why I think Brad correctly said, focus on the joy of it, because the joy will overpower the fear, right? If you focus on like, I'm drawing and I'm sharing it publicly and oh boy, this stinks, but I'm getting better than last week and I'm better than last month, the month before that, right? So if you focus on that, the fear won't paralyze you. But the worst execution we can make as cartoonists when we start a project is failing to execute. That is the absolutely hands down 90% of the people that do it wrong they do it wrong because they didn't even start. They let their fear paralyze them. And I will think that's the best way to say that Jennifer's on the right path.
How many people have come up to us at comic conventions and said, I haven't started my comic yet. And I go, why? Well, I don't want to put it online and have somebody steal my idea.
Oh, God. Whenever
how many times do you hear that? And then it turns into a copyright conversation. I've got the copyright, but I don't want somebody to steal my idea. And copyright law. And it's like, listen, chances are no one's going to want to steal your idea. You got to work on that idea for a while before it's going to be worth stealing. And can somebody really steal your idea if you're putting something completely original into it? I don't know, but don't let that hold you back.
Right.
You know, gee whiz, I hate fear-based decisions.
Yeah, and I say this to Jennifer and to everyone because I have been that cartoonist. Brad has been that cartoonist. Yeah. We have all been frozen by fear when, frankly, just starting the thing, and to Brad's point, iterating on it, improving on it, and then if need be, to Brad's second point, relaunching or restarting or reshaping, usually within the first 2 or 3 years, you see a lot of cartoonists doing that. That's the best way to go because what you've done at that point is your hand skills have caught up to your editorial eye skills, you know? And so now you go, oh, I see what my writing was doing wrong. I see what my art was doing wrong. Now I'm more on a level playing field and between my editorial eye and my drawing eye. And so I'm ready to take this as a second stab.
Yep. I would almost, if I was guiding somebody's career, like if they had brought me on as an editor or something, I would tell them that your first year is a gimme. It's or maybe a better phrase from sports is a mulligan.
A mulligan.
Your first year, you're going to just do comics. You're not going to worry about a thing. It's going to be a throwaway. And then you're really going to start in your second year.
Right.
And everything, you're going to take everything you did that first year and you're going to, and as you're doing it, you know that the only place this is really going to be important is maybe as a preface to a book. Hey, take a look at how this thing started, right? That takes, by the way, takes all the pressure off. If this thing that you're working on, you know that you're doing it with the idea of learning and building and growing and practicing. Takes all the pressure off. And with the pressure off, you can appreciate the joy part, right?
Yep. And
so I would say do that first year and then with the very idea that you're planning on rebooting this in the second year.
Right. And here is the dirty little secret among every artist I have ever known, including some of the greatest artists you've ever followed.
Mhm.
If you could step into my mind, or God forbid, into Brad's mind,
Oh, God.
and what a horror show that would be if you could step in
Yeah,
there.
you'd have to constantly, if you stepped into my mind, you'd constantly have to be hunched over because if you stood up straight, you'd bump your head.
What does that mean?
I've got a very small mind. I've got a very small brain. It's a small space.
Oh, small.
You stood up straight.
I was gonna make a very different kind of joke, but that's funny. We'll let that one go. All right, yes. So no, let's say if you could step into Brad's brain, or let's do it this way, or God forbid, my brain, you would see that every day, even at this age, we go, any day now, I'm going to be a good artist. Any day now.
Yeah.
Any day now, I'm going to not suck, Brad, at being a cartoonist. That's honest to God. Not those exact words, but that background feeling is always in the back of our minds.
Yep.
And frankly, I will say this, because I don't think he would mind. When Watterson sent the artwork for Stripped, there was an insecurity even in how he was asking. He's like, so is this going to work? Is this what you want? I'm not sure about this or that. Like, everybody has the insecurities, Brad, of like, oh, I just don't want to suck. I just don't want to. I hope I don't suck to these people. I want to not suck.
I just don't want to stink the place up. That's all.
There's a fantastic quote from Miyazaki, and maybe I'm misattributing it, but I believe it was Miyazaki a couple years ago in a small interview said, and I don't remember how old he was. Let's say 78. He was like, I'm 78 years old now, and I think I'm finally ready to be a good artist. And I was like, oh, God. Oh, geez Louise. It's for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody feels like they're ready to not suck, you know?
Yeah.
So I say that sympathetically to Jennifer's moment right now because Brad and I are both ready to not suck, and we would like to do it in the least sucky way possible. So you are experiencing a universal that we all as artists feel, which is, oh, I just don't want to suck. I know I'm not going to be the greatest, but I just don't want to suck, you know?
But you know why I give the advice I give, too, in this particular topic is because we also see so many people that are so worried about doing this right and doing this wrong. And if I do this wrong, then it's going to have a ripple effect over the course of my career. And I just want to take all of that off and get you focused on being creative. That's what I want for you in your first year. I don't want you worrying about all this other stuff because it's going to keep you from being creative. There's lots of time for that later on after you really hit your stride and you're feeling confident about the stuff you're doing. But there's so many of these. Should I do this or should I do this? Should I do Patreon? Oh, if I do a Patreon, should I do it monthly or should I do it per item? Should I do a Kickstarter right away or wait? And it's like, wait. Do a comic. Get your feet on the ground. You know, all this other stuff. I'm sorry. And I know it sounds condescending and I get that. But honestly, I'm saying this with love in my heart. There's time for all of that. You got time. Yeah. You got time. Take it easy. Focus on the joy and the creativity. Get this thing and really, challenge yourself to update that comic as often as you can, as often as it fits for you. Don't give yourself a deadline necessarily, other than you want to, once you do set like some kind of a schedule, that it's a schedule that makes sense. And then you kind of try to keep yourself to it, knowing that every now and again you're going to miss that schedule and then you'll just get right back on. But don't let that derail you either. Just focus on doing that comic and take all those other worries and put them on a shelf for a little bit. You're going to come back to it. But right now, focus on doing the comic.
Right. So I have a couple last minute thoughts here. And the big one is don't fail to start. Like, that's the big one, right?
That's the biggest failure to avoid.
I also wanted to say to Brad, because we have both experienced this, isn't it a shame in life and kind of a truism that the people who have the least reason to be confident about their art are emailing us going, I just don't get it, Brad. I'm genius and I'm great and everything's perfect. And I don't know why my career's not going. And we're like, what? Why aren't you changing places with Jennifer? I want Jennifer to have your confidence and who's great. And then you get because it's like the people that are anxious about it and nervous about it, those are the ones that are actually doing good work because they're actively planning and tinkering and working on their art. Whereas the people that are overly confident, I find like they fail to stretch themselves, you know?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's a variation on that age-old situation where the people that worry about it are the ones that probably shouldn't worry about it too much.
Right. And that's why I say, like, I can already tell that Jennifer's on the right path because she's actively worrying about it, you know?
Right.
And so that itself is an indicator of like your critical mind is already whirring into gear and you're ready to go.
Yeah.
But to Brad's point, average life expectancy, at least in the U.S. for women, is in the high 70s. Average life expectancy for men, I think, is in the low 70s. So we all have time. So even if you've been putting this off in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you still have decades to go. So why not start? Starting is the biggest hurdle, and then go from there.
And knowing is half the battle. And
sorry, did I get to? I got to. What's the name of the
esoteric?
No, but the inspirational speaker that I do every once in a while.
Susan something.
Susan
anyway, something.
McTaggart. That's what it was.
Susan McTaggart.
Susan McTaggart. I got a little bit. And if you start today, then tomorrow's brighter for you. So anyway, we'll leave it at that. I think we'll leave it at that.
Well, then there's nothing left for me to say except for this. You've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my buddy Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my very good friend Dave Kellett.
Boy, that did not sound sincere. That did not sound sincere. And my, what can I say? Very good friend, my chum. This POS that I have to deal with.
Compadre, Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com. Look for it at a sci-fi convention near you.
Oh, that's a good turn on that one. I forgot about that. Well, and don't forget that this week and the next 8 weeks, the kind sponsor of Comic Lab are the good folks over at Wacom at WACOM, makers of all sorts of Intuos and Cintiq products. Please go check them out and thank them for sponsoring Comic Lab. And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode and all episodes was edited by our pal Matt Woodard at Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/Comic Lab, so we'll say that twice. Patreon.com/Comic Lab. Now, Dave, let's go back to talking about how you're supple like a reed.
Well, my doctor says that's actually a health issue.